in the heart of a brutal blizzard, a lone dog stood motionless for hours, its fur rimed with ice, unblinking eyes fixed on a battered wooden box half buried in the snow. When rescuers finally reached the scene and opened the box, what they discovered left everyone speechless. You think you've seen loyalty before, but until you hear this story, you haven't truly understood what that word means. Before I show you what this dog endured through the storm, can I ask you something small? If you believe no life, no matter how small, deserves to be left behind in the cold, and that animals like Guardian are more than just strays, they're protectors, please tap that subscribe button. Most people skip stories like this, but your one click could help this reach someone who really needs to hear it. The blizzard hit Cedar Ridge without mercy. It rolled in like a slow-moving avalanche of white, swallowing everything in its path. At first, it was just a steady drift, small flurries dancing on the window panes and rooftops like children playing. Nothing alarming. People in Cedar Ridge had seen snow before. Winters here weren't easy, but they were expected. But by mid-morning, the snow had become heavier, colder, meaner. It slammed against homes like fists on doors. Wind rattled window frames and howled down empty alleys like it was looking for something to destroy. By noon, the town was on full alert. Power lines began to snap under the weight of ice. Emergency sirens wailed in the distance, and the local radio station looped the same warning over and over again. Stay inside. Do not travel unless absolutely necessary. This storm is not letting up anytime soon. Shops closed early. Schools released kids before lunch. Roads turned to sheets of ice, and even the salt trucks struggled to gain traction. Tree limbs cracked and felt like bones breaking. It wasn't just another snowstorm. It was the kind of cold that crawled through cracks in the walls and settled in your bones. The kind that stole your breath when you stepped outside. And it came fast, faster than the town could prepare for. But in the middle of it all, right at the edge of Silver Pine Park, stood a dog. Alone, still, not running for cover, not barking for help, just standing in the open, facing the wind. His fur, once a soft, warm tan, was stiff with frost. Every gust of wind added a new layer of snow to his back, like the sky itself was trying to bury him. His legs, barely visible beneath the snow drifts, didn't move. His tail stuck straight out, frozen at the tip, and his eyes, they didn't blink. They were locked in place, fixed on something ahead of him. Not the trees, not the road, not the wind, but a small, battered wooden box, half buried in the snow. Most people didn't notice him, not at first. The few who passed by, hurried inside stores or slammed car doors shut, maybe caught a glimpse, just enough to register a dog standing in the distance. But they had their own worries, their own problems. Maybe they thought, poor thing must be lost. Maybe they assumed he'd find his way to shelter. Maybe they just didn't want to think about it, because thinking about it would mean doing something. And who had time to do something when the roads were dangerous, when the power was flickering, when you had to rush home to check on your own family? So they looked away, and the dog stayed. Hour after hour, snow piled up around him. The temperature dropped. The world began to disappear into a quiet, terrifying white. But the dog never moved. Not when a branch cracked and fell just feet away. Not when a passing car sent a wave of slush flying near him. Not even when the wind picked up, so strong it nearly knocked over a metal trash bin nearby. Still he stood. But why? Why would any creature stay still in that kind of cold? Why wasn't he seeking warmth? Why wasn't he digging through trash or scratching at a door? What held him there, rooted in place? The answer was the box. From a distance, it looked like trash. Old, weathered, a few slats of wood nailed roughly together. No labels, no paint, nothing to suggest importance. But to the dog, that box might as well have been a treasure chest. His eyes were glued to it like something inside was too important to lose sight of, even for a second. A stranger walking by might have mistaken it for instinct. Dogs are weird sometimes, right? They chase shadows, bark at nothing. But this wasn't that. There was something deliberate in his stillness, a tension in his posture, like he was guarding something. As the storm got worse, his body began to show the toll. His ears drooped, his sides trembled. Ice clung to his fur-like armor, weighing him down. His paws, half sunk into snow, didn't lift once, not even to shift weight. Every now and then, he'd blink, just once, slowly, as if each movement cost him energy he didn't want to waste. And still he watched the box. By the fourth hour, the wind had shifted directions. Snow began to drift higher against the trees and fences around the park. The streets emptied out completely. Cars were stuck in ditches. Sidewalks vanished under layers of ice. The town had become a ghost, but he was still there, like a sentinel, somewhere nearby. Lights flickered inside a small convenience store. The manager, Dan, stood behind the counter watching snow whip past the windows like white flames. He sipped lukewarm coffee and debated whether to close early. That's when he saw the silhouette. Faint, hard to make out, but definitely a dog. He squinted. Something about it didn't sit right. Most animals don't stand still in a blizzard. They hunker down, they hide, they run. But this one, it was like he chose to stay. Dan grabbed a flashlight, walked to the front door, and opened it just a crack. The cold hit like a slap. He shined the light toward the figure. Stillness. Then he spotted the box. His breath caught, but he didn't know why. It was too far to see inside, too snowy to think clearly. But something in his gut said, this isn't right. Dan considered walking out there, but the wind was brutal. He had customers to think about. Power was likely to go out. He closed the door, made a mental note to check again later. But by the time he looked again, the snow had thickened. The dog was barely visible anymore, just a shadow, buried in white. 10 more people saw the dog over the next few hours. A teenage couple from across the street, a city worker checking on down power lines, a woman walking quickly to her car after a late shift. Every single one of them noticed, but none of them stopped. One took a blurry photo and posted it online. Some poor stray out here in this storm. Hope someone helps him. Another mentioned it in a group chat. Anyone know whose dog this is? Just standing by the park. But still no one came. And the dog, he didn't flinch. He didn't look scared. He just stood there, guarding the box. As the night crept in, the storm only got worse. Temperatures dropped below -20. The snow was waist-deep in some areas. Power outages rolled through neighborhoods like dominoes. Emergency services were backed up. Even the animal shelter had shut down temporarily due to frozen pipes. The town had shut its eyes, but one set of eyes stayed open, still, sharp, focused, watching that box. What was in there? A piece of meat? Something that smelled familiar? Maybe a toy? An old blanket? No, that didn't make sense. No scent could hold a dog in place this long. Not in these conditions. Not when every second made his body colder, stiffer, weaker. Whatever it wasn't an object. It was someone, something alive, or something that had been. Something the dog wasn't willing to leave, no matter what. The clock struck midnight. 15 hours had passed since the first snowflake fell. Over 6 hours since the dog had been seen standing there, motionless. The storm was finally beginning to slow, just slightly. And finally someone stopped. Not just slowed down, not just stared. They stopped. Her name was Kelsey, a volunteer for the town's rescue group. Young, stubborn, and the kind of person who didn't just hope someone would help. She became that someone. She'd been dropping off emergency food for outdoor animals when she turned the corner and saw him. A statue, a shadow, covered in snow and ice. Her heart squeezed. She pulled her car over and stepped into the cold. The wind clawed at her jacket, nearly knocking her off balance. But she kept walking. She called out, "Hey there, sweetie." No response. She crouched, slowly, not wanting to startle him. "Are you okay?" Still nothing. Then she saw the box, and everything else fell away. She reached forward, gently brushing snow from the top. The dog growled, not loud, not threatening, just enough to say, "Careful." Kelsey froze, and that's when she realized this dog wasn't stranded. He was standing guard. He wasn't stuck. He wasn't lost. He was staying. Kelsey knelt in the thick snow, her heart pounding inside her chest like a warning drum. The dog was no more than 3 feet away, his body trembling slightly, but his eyes never leaving the box. There was frost caked on his nose, icicles hanging from his fur. Still, he didn't move. He was soaked, frozen, and starving, but he didn't care. All he cared about was that box. Kelsey tried to calm her breathing as she reached out a hand, slow, deliberate, toward the edge of the lid. Her gloves were stiff with ice. The wind howled louder now, rattling the trees like bones above them. The snow whipped into her face, but she didn't flinch. As her fingers brushed the side of the wooden box, the dog let out a sound. Not a bark, not a growl, a whine, low, guttural, filled with something beyond words. Pain, fear, desperation, all wrapped into one heartbreaking cry. Kelsey froze. "I'm just going to look," she whispered gently. "I promise I won't take anything unless it needs help." She shifted her weight, crunching snow beneath her knees, and finally pulled the lid open. The wood creaked. It had swollen from the wet snow and stuck at first, but gave with a hard tug. And there, curled up in the corner, were 3 newborn puppies, tiny, barely moving, covered in shredded newspaper that had frozen solid. Their eyes were still closed. Their breaths were shallow, barely visible against the freezing air. One of them let out a faint, broken squeak. Kelsey's eyes widened. Her breath caught. Oh my God, they were alive. The dog stepped forward, just once, placing himself between Kelsey and the box. Not threatening, just protective. His body blocked the wind. His eyes flicked between her and the puppies. She knew what this meant. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't some strange curiosity. He wasn't near the box by chance. He wasn't guarding it because it smelled good. He'd been protecting them. For how long? Hours? Days? She didn't want to imagine. Are they yours? She whispered to the dog, knowing she wouldn't get an answer, but still asking, because it felt wrong not to. The dog didn't respond. He didn't need to. Kelsey's fingers shook as she pulled out her phone and hit the number for the rescue hotline. Her voice trembled. This is Kelsey Mathers. I need a team at Silver Pine Park right now. I found a dog and a box of puppies. They're alive, but barely. I need blankets, heat packs, everything. The dispatcher hesitated, then asked, in this storm, are you safe? I'm fine, Kelsey lied, but they're not. Please hurry. While she waited, Kelsey peeled off her scarf and tried to tuck it into the box, wrapping the puppies the best she could. The dog watched, eyes darting to every move. She looked up at him. You did this, didn't you? You kept them alive. Still, he stood there, chest heaving from the cold, tail stiff with frost. Minutes passed. Kelsey kept whispering to the puppies, hold on, babies. Just a little longer. Help is coming. She was crying now, tears freezing to her cheeks. The dog took one more step forward, then another. Finally, he collapsed beside the box, not out of trust, but exhaustion. His body curled around it like a blanket. He'd done it again, even as his own body gave out. He wrapped around them to shield them from the storm. When the van arrived, headlights piercing the thick curtain of snow, 2 volunteers jumped out carrying crates, blankets, and emergency kits. Oh my, one of them gasped seeing the scene. They rushed over, and Kelsey stood, arms stiff, hands numb. There's 3 puppies, she said. They're alive but cold, barely moving. The male volunteer gently lifted the puppies, one by one, wrapping them in fleece-lined towels and placing them inside a heated crate. What about the dog? The other asked. He's their protector, Kelsey replied without thinking. I think he's the reason they're even alive. They approached carefully, trying to lift the dog into a second crate. He didn't fight, didn't growl, didn't resist. He just looked at the puppies, and when he saw them placed safely inside, he allowed himself to be lifted. Inside the van, the heat was turned all the way up. Hot water bottles surrounded the crates. The volunteers sat in silence, staring at the animals they had just pulled from the edge of death. Kelsey never stopped watching the dog. Even now, in the warm light, his fur was soaked through. His eyes were bloodshot. His paws were cracked and bleeding. His ribs showed through his sides. He should have been dead, but somehow he wasn't, and neither were the pups. At the shelter, they were rushed inside. The puppies were placed in an incubator. Heated pads were rotated. IVs were started. A vet on call stayed the entire night, monitoring them. One pup, smaller than the others, was especially weak, and for hours it wasn't clear if she'd make it. But by sunrise, all 3 were breathing steady, alive. The dog was treated next. The staff worked carefully. They cleaned his paws, removed clumps of frozen fur, applied ointment. He didn't flinch. He didn't whimper. He just kept glancing toward the incubator. They named him Guardian, not because it sounded good, but because it was true. He had guarded life itself, when no one else had bothered to look. For the first few days, Guardian didn't eat much. He was cautious, quiet, but not aggressive. The only time he stirred was when the staff opened the incubator. Then he'd sit up, watch, make sure. It was clear, those weren't just any puppies to him. He had bonded with them. Maybe he was their father, maybe not. It didn't matter. He had chosen to be. As news of the rescue spread, the story went viral. The shelter posted photos. Guardian, lying in the snow, the wooden box. The moment they opened the lid, the puppies, eyes closed, but breathing. People across the country were stunned. How did the dog survive that long? Why didn't he just leave? What was in that box that meant so much? The answers were simple. He stayed because they couldn't leave, and he refused to abandon them. The shelter's phone rang nonstop. People wanted updates. Donations poured in. A local news station ran the headline. Dog stands guard over abandoned puppies in blizzard, all found alive. Veterinarians reviewed the timeline and weather data. One of them, Dr. Megan Hill, said during an interview, in conditions like that, a human without shelter can develop hypothermia in under an hour. For a dog to survive outside for over 6, and for the puppies to survive at all, it's nothing short of a miracle. That dog didn't just survive, he gave his body warmth to keep those babies alive. Over the next week, Guardian started to come back to life. He ate, he slept, he even wagged his tail, just once, but it made Kelsey cry. He had made it, so had they. The puppies were named Hope, Ember, and Storm. They grew stronger every day, and every time Guardian saw them, his whole body relaxed. He would sit near the glass of their warming bed and just watch. Like a proud parent, Kelsey visited every morning. She'd bring him special treats, scratch behind his ears, and say, "You did good, Guardian, real good." He never barked, never made a sound, but his eyes always said enough. Then came the day when Hope, the runt, took her first steps. Guardian stood up at the exact moment, tail wagging, head tilted. When the shelter staff let him into the room with the puppies, something incredible happened. The 3 pups waddled to him immediately. No hesitation, no fear. They knew him. They remembered. Guardian curled around them like he had in the snow, licked their tiny heads, let them crawl all over him. And in that moment, surrounded by life, he looked whole. For the first time in a long time, he belonged somewhere. And maybe for the first time in his life, he was home. For weeks, the shelter buzzed with quiet hope. The puppies, Hope, Ember, and Storm, grew stronger. Their wobbly legs grew steadier. Their eyes opened wide and curious, and their little barks began to echo through the halls. Every milestone was a celebration, every heartbeat a victory. Guardian, too, was changing. Each morning, when Kelsey arrived, he would already be at the front of his kennel, tail thumping against the wall, ears perked, not with fear this time, but expectation. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was healing. But Kelsey could sense something beneath it all, a tension in Guardian that hadn't fully let go. He was present, yes, but never fully relaxed, never totally at ease. Like part of him was waiting, bracing for something bad, something from before. The shelter staff started prepping the puppies for adoption. Dozens of families had applied. One woman offered to adopt all 3. A retired couple drove in from 4 states away, just for a chance to meet them. But something about separating them from Guardian didn't sit right with Kelsey. "They need each other," she said during the morning meeting. "They'll be fine," said the shelter manager. "They've got each other." Guardian's a different story. And that was true, too, because Guardian wasn't a puppy. He wasn't tiny or fluffy or photogenic. He was a big, slightly scarred, almost senior dog who flinched when strangers got too close. Everyone loved the idea of Guardian, but no one had stepped forward to actually give him a home. Until a woman named Margaret walked through the doors. She was tall, graying at the temples, and wore a blue scarf wrapped tightly around her neck. There was something gentle in the way she moved, like she didn't want to disturb the air around her. "I saw his photo," she said to the front desk. "The one of him curled around the box." "You mean Guardian?" the receptionist asked. She nodded. "I'd like to meet him." Kelsey brought her to the back. "Just go slow," she said as they approached the kennel. "He's cautious." Margaret crouched beside the gate. Guardian was sitting on his blanket, head down, eyes flicking between them. "I don't want to scare you," she whispered. "You look like you've seen too much already." And then, slowly, she held out her hand through the bars. No sudden moves, no words, just presence. Guardian sniffed her fingertips, then gently pressed his head against her hand. Kelsey's eyes widened. He's never done that on the first meeting. Margaret didn't say anything right away. She just sat there, hand on his head, eyes soft. Then she said quietly, I know what he's waiting for." Later, over coffee in the shelter kitchen, Margaret told them her story. She'd worked in rescue for decades, retired now, lived alone in the woods, about 30 minutes out of town. No kids, no pets. Her last dog had passed 2 winters ago. "I wasn't planning on getting another," she said, fingers wrapped around the mug. "But when I saw him," she pulled out her phone, showing them the viral photo Guardian, curled around the wooden box, his eyes filled with snow and sorrow. "I couldn't stop thinking about it," she whispered. "Something about that look, that loyalty, that pain. I've seen it before, in animals and in people." She looked up. "I don't just want to adopt him. I want to understand him." Kelsey hesitated. He's not an easy case. He still flinches at loud noises, hates car rides, doesn't eat unless he sees the puppies. Margaret smiled. "Good. I wasn't looking for easy." The adoption was finalized that afternoon. Margaret signed the papers. The staff helped her load Guardian gently into her van, wrapped in a thick blanket. He looked back only once, toward the incubator, where the puppies were curled together in a pile of sleep. Kelsey stood outside the shelter, hands shoved in her jacket, watching the van pull away. She was happy, and terrified, and proud. because Guardian wasn't just going to a new home. He was carrying with him a story that no one could truly understand, except the puppies. And maybe, just maybe, Margaret. 2 days later, the shelter phone rang. It was Margaret. "He's not eating," she said quietly. "Not sleeping. He just stares at the corner of the room, like he's listening for something." "Did something happen?" "No, it's not that. He's not afraid. He's missing something." Kelsey closed her eyes. She knew. The puppies. Back at the shelter, Hope had begun limping. It wasn't major, just a slight wobble in her back right leg, but the vet suggested keeping all 3 pups a little longer, just to be sure they were healthy before adoption. That gave Kelsey an idea. She drove out to Margaret's cottage 2 days later with a crate in the backseat. Inside were Hope, Ember, and Storm, wrapped in blankets, curious noses pressed against the mesh. Margaret opened the door, stunned. "I thought, not for keeps," Kelsey said. "Just a visit." Guardian was lying on the rug, head resting on his paws. When he saw the crate, he didn't move. He froze. Then one paw lifted, his head rose, his ears perked, and when Kelsey opened the crate and let the puppies out, he stood, wobbly at first, and stepped forward. The reunion was silent, but it was louder than any bark, any cry. Hope ran to him first, licking his chin. Ember and Storm rolled under his legs, tails wagging furiously. And Guardian, he laid down and let them crawl all over him. His eyes closed, and for the first time, he slept, deep, peaceful, safe. Margaret sat next to Kelsey on the couch, both watching the quiet scene unfold. "I think you were right," Kelsey whispered. "He was waiting for something." Margaret nodded. He was waiting for them. After that, there was no question. The adoption plan changed. The shelter board met, rules were bent, and Margaret officially adopted all 4. Guardian, Hope, Ember, and Storm. They went home together because they had never been apart. The news broke again. Another round of viral posts. This time, it wasn't just about the dog who saved puppies in the snow. It was about the family that healed together. Kelsey visited often. The cottage was quiet, warm, filled with the smell of wood smoke and lavender. The puppies grew faster than anyone expected. Storm chewed every slipper. Ember liked climbing onto Margaret's bed and refusing to get down. Hope, despite her limp, was the fastest runner of the 3. And Guardian, he was their anchor. He watched them, guided them, and every night, curled around them the way he had in the snow. One night, while sitting by the fire, Margaret told Kelsey a story. "I had a son," she said, "long time ago. Lost him when he was still a baby." Kelsey said nothing. "I think that's why I recognized that look in Guardian's eyes. That grief, that desperation, that drive to protect something helpless." She looked down at Guardian, who was sleeping at her feet. "He reminds me that love doesn't always look like joy. Sometimes it looks like sacrifice." Kelsey nodded, tears slipping down her face. "Sometimes it looks like standing still in a blizzard." Guardian lived for 3 more winters. He grew gray around the muzzle, slower in the legs, but never stopped watching, never stopped loving. When he passed peacefully by the fire, the puppies were curled around him, bigger now, but still his. And Margaret whispered in his ear, "You kept your promise." In the years that followed, Margaret would often sit on the porch of her cottage, a cup of tea in her hands, and watch the sun set over the snowy hills. Hope, Ember, and Storm, now grown, would chase each other through the snow-covered trees, tumbling and leaping like pups again, their barks echoing into the woods. And every time they passed the old cedar stump near the back fence, they'd slow down, just for a second, and look. That was where Guardian was buried, wrapped in the same scarf Kelsey had tucked into the box that day in the snow, under the same sky where he'd once stood still for hours, refusing to leave. People often ask Margaret why she kept all of them. Wouldn't it have been easier to just adopt one? She always smiles and says the same thing. It wouldn't have been a family. Guardian didn't just protect those puppies. He protected Hope. He stood in the middle of a storm that would have made most people turn away, and he refused to move. Not because he couldn't, but because he wouldn't. Because love, real love, is often quiet. It doesn't come with grand speeches or perfect timing. Sometimes, love is a dog standing still in the snow, eyes fixed on a box, waiting for the world to see what he already knew, that there was something inside worth saving. And maybe that's the part people forget. Maybe we live in a world too quick to walk by the suffering, too quick to assume the box in the snow is empty, or that the dog guarding it is just another stray. But every now and then, we're given a story that shakes us, that reminds us how powerful it is to stay, to protect, to love, without asking for anything in return. Guardian didn't have a voice, but somehow, he told the world everything, with frozen paws, with an aching body, with a heart that wouldn't give up. He told us that life is fragile, that love is fierce, and that sometimes the quietest heroes leave the loudest legacy. So if you ever find yourself in the middle of a storm, unsure whether anyone's watching, or whether the struggle you're enduring is even seen, remember Guardian, remember the dog who stood still, and the life that was saved because of it. If this story moved you, watch our next one. It might just restore your faith in humanity all over again.